and welcome back to Analog Slop, where two music industry lifers revisit the enemy and melody maker of their youth, which in our case is the 90s. We're exploring artists we discovered as wide-eyed teenagers, only to disown as sneering 20-somethings. Now, unshackled from our hipster baggage, we dive deep into the pre-digital age to look back on a time when music news came but once a week. My name is Graham Best. I've worked in music publishing and music tech for over 20 years.
And my name is Adam Bushell. I've been a music supervisor for 20 years.
Each week, one of us will read the NME, one of us will read the melody maker, and we will pick out the most interesting stories and discuss them.
This week, it's the 20th of October 1990. NWA are banned from HMV, Goth exists, Baggy is compiled, Brian Eno and John Cale form an uneasy alliance, and the Lars really don't like their debut album.
Welcome to our deepest of dives so far. We are going back to 1990. So by the skin of our teeth, we are still able to assert ourselves as a 90s music podcast. I think the fact that we are going so far back perhaps explains the disconnect between how this period is celebrated now and how it is presented on the ground by Melody Maker this week.
Agreed. I had the enemy this week. My issue was a bounty of now, frankly, legendary bands that are incredibly well thought of.
How the hell did you get that end of the bargain? Well, all right. That sets me up for my my mea culpa this week. This is a pretty embarrassing admission. So, at the risk of revealing too much of how this podcast comes together, as we scanned our archives with a shared desire to go as far back as we could within our 90s music remit, this week's Melody Maker caught my eye. So the cover has this giant tribal gathering strapline and a portrait of these two fried-looking, long-haired white guys in sunglasses.
How young we were, Graham.
When indeed. Yeah, what a whale of a time we were having at age 10 and 11. Anyway, on the basis of that headline and that picture, I concluded that this must be some super interesting early dance music festival coverage. Tribal Gathering being one of the first legal licensed electronic music festivals in the UK.
Yeah, I would have guessed Spiral Tribe is where you're going with this.
Well, yeah. I kind of figured that was the kind of space we were going to be covering, and the guys on the cover were probably some like mid-late period Balearic wrong-uns that I didn't recognize, but whose names would instantly kind of click. This is not the case. The two guys on the cover are Ian Astbury from the 80s, 90s UK hard rock dramatists The Cult. I'm pretty sure most people listening to this will know their greatest hit, She Sells Sanctuary. And the gentleman with him is Wayne Hussey, who was a former member of capital G goth band Sisters of Mercy, and by 1990 is the leader of a band called The Mission. Remember those names. The other misstep I made in my assumption was that Tribal Gathering didn't actually start until 1993.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're a bit early on that.
Yeah, I sure was. So that headline, in fact, references an Ian Astbury curated US festival called The Gathering of the Tribes that sees The Cult share the stage with Ice-T, The Charlatans, The Mission, Iggy Pop, Sinead O'Connor, Queen Latifah, and UK glam rock band The Choir Boys.
That's quite a lineup.
Yes, it certainly is a gathering of tribes. But even outside of that comical misinterpretation of the cover, the supporting cast mentioned on this is pretty deranged. We've got NWA, we've got Pop Will Eat Itself, John Cale, Public Image Limited, Edwyn Collins, before A Girl Like You, but a long time after Orange Juice. There is a very, very young Ocean Colour Scene getting a shout out.
Gig review of Ocean Colour Scene in my issue as well.
Yes, same. Dave Stewart is mentioned, and Professor Griff, who has recently been ejected from Public Enemy, also gets a cover shout-out.
My enemy boasted 72 bulging pages, it says on the top right, and boy, were they bulging. There's a lot going on this week for me.
Oh, a non-music front page mention, we're not going to get into it in any detail, but it's worth calling out, is David Lynch's Twin Peaks is mentioned on the cover. And inside there is a preview of the exciting new TV drama that's about to screen in the UK.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I think Jonathan Ross was doing some kind of David Lynch evening, and there was a picture of the two of them together. Jonathan Ross looked like 15. David Lynch looked about 25. It was pretty disgusting, to be honest, the age we are now.
You were shocked and
Oh,
appalled.
I was shocked and appalled. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to start really. This issue was quite a time capsule. I mean, obviously we'll get into our pieces that we kind of properly looked into in a bit more depth, but things I could have talked about this week and didn't. The lead band in On is EMF, making their first appearance in the Enemy. Could have talked about that. On the front cover and in the back, there's an interesting interview with Ride, again making an early appearance pre.
Topical.
Yep, exactly. Pre debut album. The cover stars are Lush. The cover is asking the question: Are Lush the new ABBA? We discover they are not. In the interview with Steve Lamacq that they do. There's also the single of the week too. Is the debut single by Blur. Speaking of reviews, the lead review is the Morrissey album Bone a Drag. There's a really interesting big piece on Northside. You know, are they going to make it? You know, doing a big gig.
That's really interesting. Blur got positive right up in the singles column in the Melody Maker, but didn't make single of the week.
Okay.
Yeah, Northside popped up in the live reviews. I think they'd done a kind of industry showcase up in Manchester.
That's right. That was being filmed for TV.
Yeah, that's right. A snapshot of the news section of Melody Maker this week. There's a couple of things I wanted to pull out and a more general observation. The first thing, and I suspect this was covered in the Enemy as well, I suspect you may have even picked it, is that NWA have just released their first post-Ice Cube material in the shape of 100 Miles and Running EP.
Yeah.
And the release of the EP has provoked a boycott of the CD and 12-inch formats from multiple retailers, including HMV in the UK. The reason that sparked a boycott is because the extended formats include Surprise, which is also known as Fuck the Police Part 2, and the high watermark of early 90s playground rumours and puerility, Just Don't Bite It.
This was also in the Enemy. I was like, I'm not going to talk about this. But well done, Graham, for tackling this two difficult subjects in one here.
My first observation is that even though it's the first post-Ice Cube material, the loss of Ice Cube is not mentioned once in what is the leading news article in the Melody Maker.
Yeah.
Which feels like quite a surprising detail to omit.
Yeah, for context, Ice Cube, principal songwriter for NWA's earliest material.
Yeah, he's been the lyricist for everything from Eazy-E's solo debut through Straight Outta Compton. And yeah, they have misplaced him from this point forward.
And they do not have kind words to say about him or his career decisions.
Poor Benedict Arnold.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Getting back on topic slightly, I am not going to attempt to defend Just Don't Bite It.
Oh.
I'm sure our episode of Reckoning regarding evolving attitudes towards extreme misogyny in hip-hop isn't far away.
It's a hard topic to avoid, actually.
Yeah, I think we're running out of opportunities to dodge it as well. Yeah, like I said, I'm not going to attempt to defend or contextualize the contents of Just Don't Bite It, but I will say that Enemy and their UK label, which is Island, play this pretty well in terms of fanning the flames.
Mm.
So there is an official NWA statement which simply says, we don't really give a fuck. And I mean, taking a guess at NWA's 1990 UK income versus their US earnings, I can absolutely believe they do not give a fuck.
I just had just a side note. Should we start referring to ourselves as the world's most dangerous podcast?
I'll add it to the strap line going forward.
I just have like the sound of prison doors slamming at the beginning of each episode.
Speaking of ambient sound effects, I'm gonna stick my neck out and say that 100 Miles and Running is a contender for Dr. Dre's single best body of work.
Oh, do you mean the song or the EP?
The title track is his greatest production in my view, but the production across the whole EP is absolutely incredible.
I think the line, "While you treat our group like dirt, your whole fucking family is wearing our t-shirt," is an amazing line.
Also, considering that Eazy-E has lost his ghostwriter in the shape of Cube, he just goes off on one. If you didn't know he had ghostwriters, you would just be like, this guy is an incredibly talented MC. And then right at the end of the bar, to emphasize the point, and this goes back to how good Dre's production is on this, the horn stab from Theme from Shaft punches in.
Yeah.
And that's got to be one of the most played out, kind of overexposed samples imaginable. And in the context of this track, it sounds like utterly stunningly cinematic and dramatic. It's incredible how something so well worn still hits that hard. Anyway, wrapping this up with those quotes. So we've had NWA's official statement of "we don't really give a fuck." The Melody Maker claims to have sourced a quote directly from Eazy-E. I mean, I'm questioning that, but Eazy-E is quoted as saying, "I guess some people in England don't like oral sex." And then Ireland, UK really over-egged the pudding with their statement. We've heard as many as 60% of UK retailers have refused to stock the CD and 12-inch. And they finish with, "We know it's a blow, but we can get the job done."
Oof.
Yeah, thanks, Dad.
That quote wasn't in my article. I'm sure I would have noticed that.
I mean, yeah, you wouldn't forget a quote like that. Next piece is a really, really short one. It just amused me for reasons of historical perspective. There is a brief mention of Bob Mould cancelling his UK gigs in support of his second solo album, Black Sheets of Rain. The reason given is due to overwhelming US live demand, which is interesting because that's for a tour that was in support of an album that got him dropped by Virgin America due to sales underperformance and provoked the formation of Sugar in 2 years' time.
Do you know what? I had no idea that between Husker Du and Sugar that he released solo recordings.
The first one, Workbook, I really enjoy that record. He just makes a Richard Thompson solo album,
Okay.
basically. It's like majority 12-string acoustic with like lots of cello, and like it sounds like a detox from Husker Du. And Black Sheets of Rain is kind of like a dry run for Sugar, but without like much in the way of hooks. So you can imagine. Yeah.
Check that out straight off the podcast.
As I said, underwhelmed at the sales counter, but for reasons I can only begin to imagine.
People heard it and were like, you know what? I think I need to hear this live. This is not coming across on record.
I should give this album a second chance in the live arena.
And I'm going to take 10 of my friends. Yeah.
Anyway, this section has already taken up too much time, so I will close my news recap with less of a specific news piece and more a general observation.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's an observation that's going to be a running theme throughout this episode. It's October 1990. And I think you would agree that the understanding we have developed in the intervening 35 years is that between house, baggy, hip hop, and shoegaze, this is like a golden age of alternative music that we were maybe too young to truly appreciate.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Also, grunge is here.
I mean, put it another way. In the 9 months prior to this issue, Primal Scream have released both Loaded and Come Together as singles. But on the basis of this week's Melody Maker, what was actually big was goth. There is so much goth coverage. The news section alone features articles on The Mission, who we talked about earlier, who are also on the cover. There's a piece announcing Sisters of Mercy announcing an extensive UK tour that includes not one but 2 Wembley arena dates. And there's also a piece on Fields of the Nephilim.
Yeah, they're in the NME as well. I was going to say that's their one nod to goth this week.
Wow. Clearly the NME was not as big in on goth as the Melody Maker was.
I honestly, I thought this issue you were going to be like, this is wall to wall like grunge, like because not that we knew it, not that they knew it as grunge yet, because Nevermind is a year away. But obviously, Mudhoney are around, Nirvana are around. All these bands are just either bubbling under or they've hit in as big as a way that people thought they were going to. And obviously, as we know, Melody Maker very US focused in the early 90s.
I mean, were you aware of any of these bands or even this scene, like growing up?
Yes, because my brother had a friend who's goth, and he dressed like full on goth style
it blows my mind your brother had a goth friend.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
did not have that on my 90s culture bingo card.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to match the dates up here, but they had a track, I think it was a B-side that they re-recorded and was an unlikely top 10 hit single called Temple of Love. But I seem to remember that kind of predating, like, me being particularly into music. But when I look it up, it looks like that was released in 1992, by which point I was actively listening to music. So I can't really, like, square the circle on that one.
I think if it's just an 80s thing. I mean, Bauhaus is like, what year is Bela Lugosi's dead? It was like 82 or something.
Yeah, because you've got, like, the initial wave of goth, which kinda comes out of post-punk. It's, like, groups influenced by Susie and the Banshees and stuff like that.
Yeah, The Cure adjacent. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, like, The Cure and Susie and the Banshees are, like, proto-goth,
Mm-hmm.
and other bands pick that up and run with it in a particular direction. I mean, I find it really interesting just how much coverage the Melody Maker is giving this scene, and I can kind of see a justification for this in that if you are a music paper navigating a time of extreme subcultural and genre volatility and like genre turnover, you know, as per like that previously mentioned like golden age perception. Maybe it makes sense to cuddle up to a scene with a super committed, engaged following, which I feel is sort of demonstrated by the fact that the Sisters of Mercy could take a double Wembley Arena booking. But I still found it really surprising. And I think trying to take a crash course in this scene, I mean, I know we try to be constructive here, but these bands are a challenging listen.
I mean, listen, you could argue Depeche Mode are deep into their goth phase at the
Yeah.
time, also huge. And, if you decided to listen to Depeche Mode from this period, I think you would be like, oh, maybe not I love goth, but like, you'd be a bit more enthusiastic.
But I mean, Depeche Mode are approaching it from such an electronic direction.
Of course, yeah.
And I think across the bands that I mentioned above and kind of bands adjacent to them, across all of them, there's this kind of love of quite theatrical vocal emoting and then these chintzy bordering on Andrew Lloyd Webber synth textures and like surprisingly middle of the road mid-tempo songs.
Okay.
I don't know if this is accurate. Maybe this is just kind of bias from my own exposure, like as the 90s progressed. But my sense is that a lot of this scene kind of moved away from the kind of the almost like AOR sort of stuff and it evolved into the industrial scene in the mid 90s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, things like early Nine Inch Nails or Fear Factory.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's still got a lot of the aesthetics and kind of the vibe of goth, but from a musical sense, it's way more interesting and fun.
I thought you were talking about second wave industrial, you might call it. Unlike, Throbbing Gristle.
Oh yeah, I'm not talking about anything as cool as that. Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking about the
Yeah.
kind of I'm talking about like Interscope and Roadrunner Records are interested. Like they can sell this to a metal market.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. Yeah. And obviously Marilyn Manson is a huge crossover artist in this space.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Kind of Marilyn Manson sort of piggybacks off that Trent Reznor patronage in the early mid 90s, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I think kind of an aesthetic that survives to this day, really.
There's always going to be depressed teenagers who want to flaunt it.
Absolutely.
You don't really think you're gonna get away, do you? We haven't spotted them yet, but they're somewhere in the immediate vicinity.
100 miles and running. MC Renner hold the gun in. You want me to kill a motherfucker and it's done. It system stereotype to kill and destruct is one of the main reasons I don't give a fuck.
So, literally buried at the bottom of page 4 in the news section of this week's NME is an announcement of a compilation called Happy Days with a Z. You ever heard of this, Graham?
Possibly from you.
Okay, so this is pretty much year zero for me in terms of my relationship with indie music. The piece reads as follows. Happy Mondays, The Farm, Inspiral Carpets and Ride are among the groovers featured on a new indie dance compilation released on Ireland next Monday, titled Happy Days Volume 1. Also on the 15-track compilation are Primal Scream, Pixies, The Charlatans, The Soup Dragons, and Carter, the Unstoppable Sex Machine. As mentioned in the news piece, Happy Days, actually Volume 1 was taken off the actual release, is a mostly indie dance music compilation. It was compiled by DJ, and I think it's safe to say, indie music champion Gary Crowley. I'm sure you're aware of, Graham.
Oh, yeah, founder of XFM, and prior to that, a music journalist.
Exactly. Well, yeah, he manned the phones. He actually replaced Danny Baker on the NME phones in the early. It's kind of post-punk, I think, is kind of his era, really.
His name came up in a professional conversation recently. Like, he is still active and doing things of import.
Yeah. I checked his wiki page. Yeah, he's still around. Anyway, there's a piece on the back written by him. I'm going to read that as well because it's important context. This album was compiled to reflect the events music of 1990. 15 tracks in all, but it could easily have been a double album. Who knows, maybe next time. Without waxing lyrical, we tried to pick and mix the grooviest music. Most reached the nation's ears, some didn't, but it's not about chart success, sales figures, it's about good music. No other long player contains all these bands together on one record. We feel it sums up the year that indie guitar pop finally left the bedroom, hooked up with some strident dance groovers, and had one hell of a bender night out. It's a unique album for the discerning eardrum. I hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoyed compiling it. For anybody not raised on DSPs, for young people, but I mean teenagers, pre-teens who didn't have lots of money, compilations were huge because it was a good way of getting music by lots of different bands and less of a commitment of time and effort than buying an album.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious example in the alternative space for the 90s is the Shine compilation series.
Yeah. So as you can tell from the statement, we're very much in the world of indie dance. Indie music is celebrated for going mainstream, but not selling out. You know, it's talking about reaching the nation's ears, but it's not about chart success. A familiar 90s dichotomy. We're really in the period where the kind of 60s references are quite overt, where he talks about we tried to pick and mix the grooviest music. Sounds like it could be lifted from a Pickwick Records top of the pop sleeve to me. Anyway, in terms of why this is a personal choice, is sometime in late 1990 or early 1991, I guess, my older brother bought this record. And this is where I heard most of these songs and indeed genres for the first time. I mean, I can't think where I would have heard 90% of this other than on this compilation. We mentioned the trickle down of culture from older siblings to younger siblings in an earlier episode. This compilation was a key part of that in my childhood. I must have heard this album 100 times on car journeys and booming from my brother's bedroom. To this day, I hear any of these tracks, I immediately think about them on this compilation. So, you ready for the track list, Graham?
I am desperate for the track list. My knuckles are white for the track list.
Yeah, track 1 is loaded by Primal Scream as a statement of intent. Graham, I think you can agree there's no stronger opener than this.
I would struggle to argue with that point of view.
Yeah, although from this point on, we're going to go all over the place, so get ready. Track 2 is Real, Real, Real by Jesus Jones.
You know what? I wondered if Jesus Jones would come up.
Yeah.
And my second thought was I have no idea what Jesus Jones sound like.
Okay, so I really liked this track as a child, and it was my favourite song of theirs. Again, their album around this time my brother had, so I was familiar with that and the singles. It's really funny because I listened to Real, Real, Real and I watched the video, and it's so funny. They look like they're almost like a kind of dance indie boy band put together by a major label. Like the lyrics are all like this kind of corporate e-speak, although they were signed to Food. So I guess that's just how people looked in 1990. I don't think it's survived particularly well. It's like it's a very 90s sounding pop record, but not in a good way.
I think I understand. There is a young act I spent some time with during my research this week, and I had exactly the same sensation.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like a low energy, druggier EMF. It's an insane drop from the first track. This is also a good point to make about compilations, is that obviously in 1990, he does not know which of these will be iconic tracks that he's picking in 35 years. So it's a really funny juxtaposition considering he can only choose 15 or
Yeah,
only
yeah.
choose 15. That's what the budget space allows.
Sorry to jump in briefly. Because of my time in the compilation trenches,
Ah, yeah.
I'm curious to know if there's any pretense of this being mixed, or is it track finishes, next track starts?
There is no pretense of this being mixed. I could tell you there's a wonderful 1990 artifact that goes with it, which we did not have. Well, there's a VHS release of this album, which I would have absolutely loved to own as an 11-year-old. I would have watched that over and over and over again. And they've had to obviously swap out certain tracks that didn't have videos, and I think they've added a few to kind of bump up the runtime.
I wonder if you could recreate that track list for VHS through YouTube.
You could definitely do that. And people have recreated the track list of this album on Spotify and its sequel. So it's obviously well thought of. Anyway, we now enter an insane streak of quality. People really had it good at this time. So the next track is Come Home by James.
Yeah.
I just wrote, We Are Back. This is still amazing. Fantastic track. They use the Flood mix.
I don't know if I know that one. I know the single mix and I know the Weatherall mix.
I think the single mix is the Flood mix.
Right. Okay.
You're a big fan of this track, right? You love the Weatherall mix.
Yeah, the Weatherall mix is so obnoxious. It's just got that
Oh.
like that looped up air raid siren at the start for like way too long.
I didn't revisit that because I didn't have time, but I think I will be next week. Yeah, it's interesting. There's 2 videos for this track. If you watch the 1989 one from the original Rough Trade release, I've never seen a man more obviously eat up than Tim Booth in that video. It's quite hilarious. I could be wrong. Maybe he was just tired and sweaty, and his pupils were dilating for other reasons. But
Yes, like, those 3 variables could have all coincidentally occurred
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. The next track is, I mean, probably my pick for Tastemaker's choice for the Baggy era, which is Big by New Fast Automatic Daffodils. Are you aware of this track, Graham?
I don't have a fucking clue about this.
Okay.
I can tell we've gone full Baggy hipster.
Once again, this is through no choice of my own. I've heard this track hundreds of times through it being on this compilation. I suspect other people have as well. This is an absolutely amazing track. In my head, it was kind of a silly song from my childhood, but re-listening to it, Jesus, it's absolutely brilliant. It's like something that if they'd have dropped this at like a nightclub we were at in like the mid-aughts, like, I'd kind of check this out. Like, it would have been a real tastemaker track. So imagine if the template for Baggy was like Arthur Russell, Liquid ESG, and you have an idea what it sounds like. It's great. The guy has it's funny because it has that's the vibe of the instrumentation, but he has this kind of very almost like the Farm-esque kind of Happy Mondays-y vocal, but a bit more monotone than that over the top of it.
Okay.
It's really good. It's really good.
You've sold me. I want to hear this.
Okay. The next track you may or may not be aware of. I would put it in the same camp as the last one, and that is Hippie Chick by Soho. Do you know this?
Yeah. I remember the hook.
Yeah. Okay. So, as I'm sure you recall, it samples the intro to How Soon Is Now by the Smiths. I can only imagine this did complete dance floor destruction at indie discos across the country. People must have lost their minds when this came on. An amazing pop track. The full single is now on DSPs. I highly recommend the Happiness is a Warm Hippie mix, which is really good. Sounds like something that, I don't know, young Marco might play in a set or something like that from a few years ago.
Excellent mix name as well.
The next track, 6, which I just wrote, good God, this song is fantastic, is Valoria by the Pixies, sorry. I'm sure you know this track. If you haven't heard it recently, I suggest you listen to it again because it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I've not listened to the Pixies for a long time.
Yeah.
So like I'm familiar with that track name, and that is all.
Okay, it's really good, and it may now be my favourite song of theirs. It has serious goth vibes. Going back to what you're talking about, it sounds like Sisters of Mercy, but meets Nirvana in I was going to say in pop heaven. That's a wanky thing to say, but like,
Yeah, we've spent too much time with 90s music press
I was
issues.
going to say this is the first thing that came to mind, but it's true. That's what it sounds like. It's great. Every spare moment I had that wasn't filled with listening to other stuff that we're going to get to later, I was like having a cheeky listen to this. It's just been in my head for about a week. It's amazing.
The disparity of experience this week, with you rolling on the floor in ecstasy, reliving your youth, and me trudging through the mission's greatest hits is striking.
Yeah, Fields of Nephilim must have something of merit. Yeah. Okay, so somehow the next track is even better than the last four. I found this piece of music completely overwhelming as a child. I'm sure you probably have this as well. Tracks that you heard as a child that seemed to speak to huge emotions that you had no words for and couldn't quite handle. Is this
Yeah, man.
something? Yeah, yeah. So I knew you'd get this.
Hearing Purple Rain at age 7 in the back of a car. Like, my God, what is this?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this track is Taste by Ride.
Ah.
Yeah. Okay, not the reaction. It's just like, oh yeah, that one. I don't know. Maybe it's the connection to my childhood, but I absolutely love this track. And again, I still find it overwhelming and just a beautiful piece of music. It's their peak, I would say.
Is
eh,
this from one of the early EPs?
yes, it's on the album Nowhere. It's also on the third EP called Full.
Okay.
Yeah, which are all those EPs are great. If you don't know, they're really good and worth listening to.
Nowhere is the album with the cover of the ocean, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
That cover freaks me out.
yeah, yeah. Although it looks like the music sounds, so it's a great choice. Right, we are like ready for another precipitous drop. The next track is "She Comes in the Fall" by In Spiral Carpets.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Yeah,
I thought this might be one of those one-off in Spiral Carpets, like Genius singles.
it is good. I don't mean to rag on In Spiral Carpets. I remember them better than I think they are when I listen to them now. And it's not terrible. It's just they're nowhere near in the league of what we've just heard. Obviously, for somebody making this compilation in 1990, it would just make complete sense to go between. You could see what he's doing. He's clumped together the two quote unquote kind of rock tracks like Taste and Valoria go back to back quite well. And then he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
right, back to Baggy, back to the MO of this compilation.
Is the In Spirals track even that baggy though? Because when I think of it, it's more like we are doing like 60s garage rock with an organ.
Yeah, well, garage is my primary thing that I think of them. It's baggy. I guess they're baggy because of the way they look and the time they're making music and the production. But yes, garage is the primary genre here.
Yeah, like when I think of In Spiral Carpets, I mean, I'm not gonna claim to be an In Spiral Carpets head.
Uh-huh.
But the two tracks that if I want to hear something like that, I go to a Saturn V and Dragging Me Down.
Okay, yeah, Dragging Me Down's great. Yeah.
I like both of those. They're quite sort of thick, warm analog productions. Like there's not any of those like insipidly thin break beats that I think of with like the sort of arse end of Baggy.
I feel like there's always some flab on their tracks. Like the tracks should all be 2 minutes long. They should just hammer them out and then leave. And they don't
Yeah.
never do that. They always kind of go into some strange diversions in the middle, and you're just like, don't do that bit. Just do the good bits and then get out of it. You don't need to like.
Yeah, it's like you have forgotten one of the most important lessons from these garage bands that you love. Like, like if it's over 3 minutes, you're doing it wrong.
Well, okay. So next is Groovy Train by The Farm.
I know this is like a widely derided song, but I cannot recall how it goes.
Okay, so I honestly do not find this terrible. It has a disposition towards life that I find irresistible. That's what I wrote. It's got really kind of like the lyrics are kind of reminiscent of Do Wah Diddy. It's really weird. Like the verses of Do Wah Diddy. It kind of reminded me of that.
Okay.
But it has a very kind of, like Can You Dig It by Mock Turtles?
Yeah, that one I remember.
Okay, you know the guitars in that?
Hmm.
It kind of got kind of a guitar line in it that's a bit like that. I feel like this track has been used on a million, like, DFS sofa ads. Do you know what I mean? It's got that kind of vibe to it. I find it irresistible. I know it's stupid and it's naff and so are they, but, like, I like this track. Not as much as I like the next track, which is The Only One I Know by The Charlatans. In my head, this is at the time, and this was like the quintessential indie track. Like, and
Mm.
looking at them as they are now. I mean, we've talked about Tim Burch's hair at length in earlier episodes, but yeah, organs, bowl cuts, wah wah pedals, and dreamy vocal performance. It's just that's indie in a nutshell. Yeah, still slaps. The next, they're a highly contentious band, I think it's safe to say, or they were at the time. Probably less so now. The track is Circle Square by the Wonder Stuff. This is a band I actually really liked as a kid because they were just around and they kind of had funny song titles and stuff.
Yeah, they caught my attention, like, before I got into music as well.
Mm.
Like, Welcome to the Cheap Seats was a banger as far as, like, preteen me was concerned.
Yeah, Size of a Cow. I remember that was like, yeah.
Yeah, that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Had a kind of sing along chorus. Although this track just sounded really boring to me. I was kind of ready to have like a really hot take on it, and it sounds very, very adult contemporary in a weird way. Track 12, the unforgettable Sheriff Fat Man by Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine. I really, really want to have a long conversation about this band. I had no idea how popular they were in the weeklies until we started doing this, and we got the early 90s weeklies, and they just seemed to be on the cover every other week of the NME.
Constantly. Yes. While we've been taking delivery of all these kind of like early 90s kind of loads of melody makers and NMEs, the
Yeah.
amount of times Carter on the cover is nuts.
Absolutely. Either way, I don't want to talk about them now. We're going to put a pin in it. I know this has become a bit of a leitmotif for this podcast of things we don't have time, can't be bothered, or haven't done the notes to talk about. We'll be like, yeah, we'll talk about Pulp later. But like, we will talk about Casting Unstoppable Sex Machine at another time. This is not that time. Either way, I listened to this compilation about 3 or 4 times. I had 2 longish plane journeys and lots of walking around, so I kind of got it in a few times in the last week. By my 4th listen to this song, it had kind of won me over again, even though the first time I was like, oh, this is pretty excruciating. Anyway, we'll talk about them at a later date. Next track, in our continuing our series of 90s hits with bad SEO, it is Progen by The Shaman, which should have been called Move Any Mountain, because then people would know what it was.
Yeah, I now I understand exactly what track you mean.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. I would file this next to Jesus Jones for 90s sounding records that I feel have aged poorly.
Interesting. Well, not very interesting, but sidebar. The very first single I ever bought of my own volition was The Shaman's Ebenezer Good.
Ah, that is an interesting sidebar.
Make of that what you will.
I look forward to the deep dive on Ebenezer Good and its hidden meanings.
Yes, it's densely hidden meanings. Perhaps we'll be the first to crack the code.
Anyway, speaking of ecstasy, the next track is also, we're back to amazing tracks, and that is Rope for Luck by Happy Mondays. Not to make myself sound too like ahead of the curve, but I really loved this as a child. I'm really going to throw myself under the bus in the next track, so don't worry. But yeah, this is an amazing track, and it just, when this band were good, they were very, very good. Again, we'll probably return to them later, I would say. Lots to say on the Happy Mondays at another date. The final track, as I say, not to let myself off the hook completely, which I also loved as a child, is I'm Free by Soup Dragons, which I don't think is aged particularly well. I thought this is kind of awful.
Do you think part of the poor aging is because it has been bleached of any meaning or emotional connection from overexposure?
No, I don't think so, because I feel like I heard it a lot at the time, and now
Okay.
I just haven't heard it since, because it's too expensive to sync. Do you know what I mean? Because it's a Rolling Stones song, so it's not like you hear it around. Like, it's not, you'd think it would be on like a I don't know, like a mobile phone ad or something several times, but it just hasn't happened because of the Stones thing.
For those of us who are not close observers of Super Dragon's label copy, uh, what is that Rolling Stones connection?
It's literally a cover of a Rolling Stones track. I'm Free is a Rolling Stones track.
Oh shit! I didn't realize that. I thought you were like alluding to a kind of bittersweet symphony style like sample or interpolation.
No, no. It's Rolling Stones track, which in hindsight they should have just ripped it off. They'd be rich by now if they had done that. Anyway, this track gets lambasted in this week's NME for jumping on the Baggy bandwagon. Not this track, sorry, this band, disgracing their C86 roots. Yeah, that was Happy Days by various artists.
I mean, that's a pretty tight compilation.
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, I could delete half of it and keep the other half, but yeah, it's good.
There's also some like random selections in there that I want to check out for myself. But the one that I really want to remind myself of is Progen by the Shaman.
Oh, okay. Well, you're going to be really disappointed.
Yeah, I'm confident it's aged terribly, but I got to scratch that itch after this.
Fair enough. Although I would highly recommend the new Fast Automatic Daffodils Big.
That sounds like the sort of obscure deep cut like I want to dig into, like 1990s answer to Johnny Boy. So prior to recording, I was confident we had both picked this from our respective issues. I'm less confident of that now.
Okay.
um, so yeah, album review and more of Wrong Way Up by John Cale and Brian Eno.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
This was their sole collaborative album, for reasons that will become apparent. And one that until relatively recently felt like a kind of lost gem that was confined to YouTube or Soulseek. Aptly, it debuted on streaming services a few years back and is a lot more accessible now. So, quick recap of the key players here for our younger listeners. John Cale, a giant of 20th century experimental music, co-founder of the Velvet Underground, producer of dozens of legendary albums, active to this day at the age of 83, having just appeared with Charlie XCX on her latest single. And absolute trivia, and only discovered last night, he was born within 1,000 meters of where my parents now live.
Wow. 1,000 meters. That's really close.
It's literally like kind of barely the next village
Okay.
from where my parents live. So that was a surprise. Moving on from that biographical insight, Brian Eno, also a giant of 20th century experimental music, pop producer extraordinaire in the 80s and 90s, cultural theorist, and general provocateur. He's still making music, but he's increasingly active in political lobbying, not least the Gaza situation and climate change. Anyway, the first flag with this Melody Maker review is that said review is accompanied by individual portraits of the two protagonists rather than a group shot. John Cale looks fantastic. He looks like the Prince of Darkness who's been cast in a particularly challenging run of Hamlet. Eno, on the other hand, Eno resembles a kind of home counties computer developer who's just made his first million off of a Commodore Amiga game.
He's in his kind of fluffy side hair phase, isn't he, at this point?
Yeah, he looks freakishly young as well.
He still does. He's aging really well.
I don't know what his kind of lifestyle is, but it seems pretty healthy.
Esoteric, I'll say.
Yeah. So this is a bit of a roller coaster review. Melody Maker kicks off by stating that Cale and Eno have individually spent the last 15 years with, I quote, an at best ambivalent relationship towards making rock music. Like, that's a kind of cardinal sin.
Okay.
I mean, fine. One's a classically trained, like, conservatory composer. and the other is arguably more conceptual artist than musician.
The other is Brian Eno.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Neither of them could give two shits about rock music.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, this is kind of crazy. The review goes on to assert that almost everything Eno has created alone, so that's kind of a big qualifier. Almost everything Eno has created alone since 1977's Before and After Science has been bilge. I mean, I don't think that's how the post 77 Eno catalogue is regarded in the 21st century, to put it mildly.
Okay, yeah.
But I mean, the guy's setting out his stall, like, you know, like they're against rock music, which is implied to be a terrible error of judgment. And everything since Before and After Science sucks. Although, interestingly, by 1990, Before and After Science is also the last time Eno has sung on a record until this project. So yeah, Eno takes a kicking up front. Cale is positioned, I would say, as a more engaging artist with a seemingly purer artistic intent and a higher degree of commitment. But the the review mentions that he is prone to as many atrocities as masterpieces. Which, like if you got a discography that big, then yeah, sure, like you're gonna have some misses in there.
Yeah, yeah.
How can I put this? Because there's a lot of context and knowledge or baggage rather than knowledge, that I'm bringing to this piece, which is outside of the review. There's a fantastic Pitchfork piece on this album from 2017, kind of that dives in the tensions between the two artists and their relationship. There's an authorized Eno biography on Some Faraway Beach from 2009.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that book.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
I can't find it, which is really annoying.
Maybe I got your copy.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah.
But On Some Faraway Beach is particularly punchy on this album, and the process of creating it, which is interesting because I think in the early 2000s, Eno took umbrage to how Cale's autobiography had portrayed the making of it.
Okay. Yeah.
I would love to comment on that, but John Cale's autobiography, the wonderfully titled What's Welsh for Zen,
Yeah. Ah, yeah.
has been out of print for 20 years, and secondhand copies seem to start at 50 quid. So if someone could reprint that, that'd be greatly appreciated. So something the Melody Maker review is good at, and that's been really apparent to me listening to the album, right, as part of this, is there's such an intense duality to the album. And for me, that kind of undermines any sense of cohesion, like listening to it in full has. In my memory, I loved this album,
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
which I think is perhaps linked to its enforced scarcity,
Okay.
like in previous years. I think what I've discovered this week is that the opening track, Lay My Love, is definitely a top 50 song of all time for me. And the rest of the album really struggles to live up to it.
Okay. Yeah. It starts really strong. That's my memory of it.
Lay My Love stands out so much because it feels like a genuine collaboration. The two of them are sharing the vocals. The production is this kind of blend of overlapping kind of clattering loops. There's this swooning viola, which you would assume is John Cale, kind of like layering over everything. And there's this mental keyboard melody. The only way I can describe it is it sounds like a pilled up football terrace.
Yeah. It's a very frantic song. Yeah.
Yeah, but the keyboard melody literally sounds like that kind of like 90s ideal of like the football hooligans are taking drugs
Okay. Okay.
and hugging each other. Like it's you can imagine a crowd chanting it in a sort of faintly ridiculous way. But I think it works on Lay My Love so well, but over the course of the album, it wears really thin.
Mm.
I mean, Eno's spoken in Faraway Beach, and I think some other places as well, about when he came into recording this album, he was in an incredibly happy place. kind of like he's living in his beautiful big house in Woodbridge in Suffolk with his like state of the art studio built into it. I'm sure that Joshua Tree money came in
Yeah,
handy.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, like his daughter's just been born. He even references the World Cup being on as like being an exciting thing. And he really can't stress enough when he talks about the context that he was just in a really upbeat frame of mind.
Mhm.
But to me, there's this kind of almost forced jollity, like the kind of like that trips up a lot of the tracks. The closest I can think of as a comparison is kind of late '70s Beach Boys album, Beach Boys Love You,
Mm.
which is more of a kind of a Brian Wilson solo album
Yeah.
with a lot of kind of synth hammering and ragged Brian Wilson vocals.
It sounds like he's falling apart and the others are trying to prop him up. A lot of that period does, yeah.
It's like falling apart in that kind of hide the pain Harold way of like, no, no, I'm having fun. I'm having fun.
That's exactly it. It's like you're trying to talk yourself up from like a deep place. Yeah. I think also John Cale, not Mr. Upbeat. I think it's fair to say.
Well, this is the thing. You've got these really bright kind of major key, like in some ways, like quite conventional, like 90s sort of pop songs. And they're rubbing up against some really maudlin noirish Cale pieces.
Yeah.
Basically, a lot of the time the album feels like two solo EPs with a couple of collaborative tracks as connective tissue. And when you hear those collaborative tracks, then you're like, this is what this album should be. That's the problem with Lay My Love. It sets this incredibly high bar for a collaborative album between two really interesting artists. And then by Cale's own admission, I think one of the Cale quotes attributed around this album is, I'm not sure Brian Eno really understands what collaboration is.
Really? I'd never heard I don't remember this Pitchfork article. I remember this album. I remember the kind of re-release and the big fuss about it. I don't think I heard it until it was re-released, if I'm perfectly honest, unless you sent me a copy, which you may well have done.
I feel like you were the one that tipped me off to it,
Okay.
like before it was re-released.
Okay. It is very possible that I kind of in some massive kind of album blog download deep dive that I would have come across this and just heard it through once and gone, wow, this is amazing, and sent it straight to you and thought, must listen to that again, and then didn't do that until it was re-released and was like, wow, this is great. And it's really funny you're talking about it, because it's kind of like I have a list of about, well, probably several hundred albums that I'm like, I must return to this. I remember this being really good. And you're actually talking me out of ever returning to anything but the title track. Just out of interest, how long is it?
Right, so the original version without all the bonus tracks is a very tight 42 minutes.
Great. How many tracks is that?
10 tracks.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
10 tracks, and then the reissue that uses the original not very good cover art.
Oh, yeah.
Like that cover art really fucking sucks.
Yeah.
That adds like various like B-sides and alternative mixes and other stuff that I got no time for.
Okay. And do they, the Melody Maker rating albums out of 10 at this point?
No, there's no rating. However, the plot twist here is that the Melody Maker really, really likes this album.
Okay. Wow.
Despite seemingly setting it up for a kicking. It compares it to the American Gothic of Mazzy Star's She Hangs Brightly, and describes it as one of the year's most haunting delights. And I'm like, are you listening to the same album? Like, it's such a weird frame of reference when so much of the album is this kind of bludgeoningly upbeat pop music.
Yeah, I thought that, see, now that you're talking about it, this kind of the vibe of kind of grinning through tears, which seems to be that I kind of thought that was the point, because it all feels kind of unstable. And Lay My Love, it does sound like one of those tracks that's about to fall apart at any time, which is how I kind of remember the album. It's just a very weird vibe, but that was kind of what was cool about it. But you're saying that's essentially down to animosity between the two of them in the studio.
Yeah, there's a great story about them being in the studio together. John Cale sees Brian Eno coming towards him aggressively, holding a chopstick like a dagger.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he runs off and hides,
Yeah.
phones his manager, and is like, "Get me out of here! This guy's a madman."
Wow.
Anyway, um, I think it's my takeaway from reading this is it's quite hard to escape the sense that Melody Maker is backing the Cale side of this equation over the Eno half. But I wonder if that's just the kind of the default position of the music press to kind of back the underdog.
It's all possible also that we're missing some context here. Did they do any press? Is there any
Well,
word do you know about this?
don't worry, I've saved this bit for the follow up. Also in this issue is an interview with John Cale
Okay.
on his own.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah.
And the interview with Cale sees him discussing this album and the previous year's collaborative album with Lou Reed, which is Songs for Drella,
Yeah.
which is a tribute to Andy Warhol and the first time the two of them had worked together properly since White Light, White Heat by the Velvet Underground.
So this is the equivalent of the same era video game magazines who would get cover exclusive previews, and when a game was clearly terrible, they'd give it like 72, 76%, when really they want to give it like 45%.
Yeah, it's like a fucking Ocean Software like movie tie-in licensed game that like, you never want to see again. um, I mean, he talks a little about the album and how challenging it's been to make, but he compares it favorably at this stage with the experience of collaborating with Lou Reed again on Songs for Drella. Like, and kind of, there's a bit of a Lou Reed bitch fest. But I think it's worth pointing out that at this stage, John Cale thinks they are still going to tour this album and play it live.
Wow.
And he references that in the interview. He's like, Eno like promised me we would play this live, and he promised me in front of multiple people.
Wow.
Obviously, that does not happen.
Yeah. Wonder if there's multiple people where that's what it is too.
A final little note, which takes us back to something which has come up in previous episodes, is that the interview with Cale wraps up with a reference to a private presentation in France that led to the spontaneous reunion of the Velvet Underground.
Wow.
And the four original members at this private event got up on stage and played heroin together. And the interview closes with Cale kind of ruefully wondering if they'll ever get to do it again.
They will.
So, yeah, I mean, be careful what you wish for,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Still have not listened to that album, even though we've played. I need that's on my list.
Yeah, I still wouldn't go out of your way for it.
Do you know what? I'm going to watch the DVD. That'll be what I'll do. That's how I'll experience it.
That will be way more interesting because I'm sure you'll be able to kind of distill the poisonous chemistry between them.
Oh dear.
To close this section with an utterly facile, reductive, and demeaning question, choose your avant-garde fighter. Who are you backing, Cale or Eno?
Who's my favourite of the two?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Eno, 100%. Some of my favourite albums of all time are made by Brian Eno. His run of albums in the 70s, which we mentioned. I think Another Green World is an amazing album. One of those albums that I always reference when you buy an album and hear it for the first time, and you're like, I'm going to listen to this like regularly until I die. Do you know what I mean? Like this is just going to be with me for the rest of my life.
I have it in that category of albums that changed how I heard music.
Yeah, absolutely. John Cale, I don't know much of his solo work. I know obviously Paris 1919, that's kind of, it almost begins and ends there for me.
Yeah, so I've gone a bit deeper on Cale's discography. I've got most of the 70s solo albums.
Okay.
The Cale backstory is something I find really seductive.
Mm.
Like the idea of growing up in a kind of remote Welsh language mining town in the Brecon Beacons. He blags a scholarship to Goldsmiths from that sort of start, and he uses that time at Goldsmiths as a springboard to get another scholarship to go and study in New York.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
Like gets to New York, forms an insanely influential cult band that he then gets kicked out of for being too avant-garde,
Yeah.
and then simultaneously embarks on this nutjob solo career while also producing even more cult albums
Yeah.
for other artists. Like, he produces like the first Stooges album, for example.
It's crazy. And who can forget his work with the Super Furry Animals?
Me. I can aggressively forget that work.
Yeah.
So anyway, point being, the concept of John Cale is something I love. I think nearly all of those 70s albums have incredible moments, but with the exception of Paris 1919 and Fear,
Mm,
they're pretty hard to sit through end to end. Although I would strongly recommend you listen to Fear.
I'm going to do it.
Whereas Eno, I find the concept of Brian Eno fundamentally annoying,
Yeah.
but I love his music.
This week in the NME on page 27, there is a one-page feature on a band that I think it's safe to say have something of a mythic status in terms of this period and British indie music, and that band is the Lars.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I instantly have a flashback to the time we sat through 4 hours of the Lars recorded output.
I've listened to a lot more than 4 hours this week. The feature is called This Could Be the Last Time. For those that are unaware, although I can't imagine there are many listening to this that are unaware of the work of the Lars, they're a heavily 60s influenced indie rock band. They could be lumped into Jangle. They also have kind of a 50s skiffle vibe, and
Yeah.
I mean, really, they are the Britpop year zero, to use that term again. They are the kind of this is where Britpop as we think of it is born, I would say, with this band. It's not quite as straightforward as that, but in terms of where we think of that genre pulling from, they were the first to do it so overtly and with such success.
Not to stick a spanner in the works straight away,
Mm.
but the point I would take issue with is the description of them as indie rock.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like they are considered indie rock purely because of their age and the time they are operating in.
Can I also say their album is released on an indie label?
Yeah, fair.
I know what you mean. They completely transcend that genre. I know you love the Lars as I love the Lars. So to call them an indie band is to do them a fantastic disservice. So I understand, but they are.
I don't want to sound like one of Ocean Color Scene, but like there's such an obvious classicism to the songwriting.
Yeah.
I really struggle to bracket them alongside, like, and this is no slight on this band, but like someone like James, for example.
Yep. No, I 100% agree with you, but we're going to get into it in some depth. So, and not really, that's not really what I want to talk about, their genre classification. But again, for those that don't know, they only released one album. They've one album, 4 singles, and a handful of compilations that are kind of official releases. They famously hate their album and think that it does not represent them. The front man, Lee Mathers, he's a notorious perfectionist and eccentric, let's say that.
A man who marches to the beat of his own drum.
That's exactly right. He just doesn't seem to give a shit about anything except getting the music in his head down the way he thinks it should be. And that's what we're going to talk about. This is a very grumpy interview with the band. They are pissed off. The album was released on the 1st of October 1990. We are on the 20th of October 1990, and this issue is dated. This article is to promote the album, but also to promote the single "There She Goes," which is being re-released for the 3rd time on on the Monday after this issue comes out.
Yeah, to clarify for listeners, the 3rd time up to October 1990.
That's right.
There will be many more re-releases.
So this is a forewarning, is that this is going to get confusing. This band have a confusing catalogue. which, much as I love them, I've never tried to grapple with properly. This is my first attempt to do so. Yeah, I always just loved that album and was happy to leave it at that. But yeah, I got elbow deep in the last this week.
I got 2 words for you. Those words are Mike and
Yeah,
Hedges.
well, he's going to come up. So the band is in a surreal position. The album is already out, and the label is hoping to push it into public consciousness. But the band's frontman, the aforementioned Lee Mavers, is aggressively disowning it in the promotional press window. I don't know whether it starts with. I think it's pretty well accepted at this point that they're having a hard time recording this album and getting something releasable. Their debut single "Way Out" was released in 1987. That's followed up by "There She Goes" in '88, and that's kind of, so they're like on a kind of single a year like work rate at this point. So
That's insane, like a 3-year album cycle for your debut album.
So yeah, and then there she go. Yeah, so there she goes is released again, as I say, in 1990, along with Timeless Melody. Feeling comes out in '91. So those are the 4 singles that are released to promote the album. We'll get into those in more detail later. So I'm guessing the sense, and it's probably well enough publicized, is that like the Lars are taking a long time to make their album, and no one quite understands why. Although there is a lot of talk about multiple producers and lots of money being spent on the record. As I say, Mavers is aggressively disowning it. The Enemy's kind of like, they preview the article in the top left, and it says, it took 3 years to make, it cost an unreasonably huge sum, it's stuffed with great songs, but the Lars still hate their new LP. This is the story which is going to be repeated over and over. I actually watched an appearance of them on Canadian TV. So on this Canadian TV show, they do an amazing version of Timeless Melody, which before that is 3 minutes of them talking about how shit the album is and how they kind of disown it. And when I say they, I mean John Power, because Lee Mavers just kind of rocks back and forth in the background, and then does the most amazing, sings this incredible song does this amazing performance of an amazing song.
I cannot stress enough for anyone listening to this who has not found this clip, which we will, if I remember, we will put a link in the show notes and try and share on socials.
Yeah.
But the fact that they pull this off with 2 guitars and they harmonize like fucking angels, having just sulked their way through an interview, is incredible.
His voice is just amazing, and his guitar playing is equally amazing. It's quite something. As you say, it's things like this, which is why you would bristle when they are called indie rock. I get it, because they are on another planet to the other bands in the Enemy. Graham, what's your history with this band? When did you first get into them?
Well, I think even though I don't think it's ever charted particularly high on any of its 29 reissues,
Yeah.
There She Goes is detached itself from the artist and has just seeped into the cultural fabric.
Yeah, I would also say it's detached itself from music. it's like a miracle. I don't know. It's just like a kind of piece of magic that exists in the world.
It really is kind of like when people talk about classic British pop songwriting, but in the lineage of, kind of like the Beatles and so on and so forth. There She Goes is just fundamentally part of that. However, I don't think it's their best song.
Okay, well, we'll get there. Mythic, this band. Principally, the myth is cemented by what they were doing before the album and what Lee Mavers has been doing in the 35 years since the album's been released. I think that's this is kind of where the myth is cemented. They're kind of 83 to 90 period and everything beyond 1991. So we've heard about these mythical demos for years, the true Lars. It's possible this article and others like it kind of really cemented that legend. The Enemy says the demos were a blueprint for their ideal sound. In these turbulent days, Lee Mavers holds them up as a paragon. Now I believe we have these demos across 2 main releases, and that is Lost Lars, 1986 to 1987, Call in All, on Viper, which is a label owned by ex-Lars members Mike Badger and Paul Hemmings, and the more recent compilation called 1987. Today, these recordings and others like them make up the majority of what is available from the band on DSPs. As I say, this is what makes this catalogue so confusing, because not counting re-releases, there are 13 releases on DSPs featuring material that is either a demo, live recording, alternate mix, remix, outtake, or rehearsal. Have you heard much of this unreleased or semi-released Viper stuff?
Honestly, I'm looking at the Viper comp track listing now, and it's so hard to tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, a lot of this stuff has been kinda repackaged and reissued, like, so many times in different configurations,
Yeah.
that I struggle to keep track of it. Right, there's 3 versions of a debut album on Apple Music. There's the original 12-track, 35-minute one.
Yeah.
There is a 17-track remastered bonus track version, and then there is the one I've spent the most time with, which is the deluxe
Yeah,
version.
the double CD one. Yeah.
Yeah, the double CD one, which has enough of the Mike Hedges
Uh,
sessions to pull together a Mike Hedges version of the album from.
yes. So I can tell you, having gone through them this week, if you haven't heard any of the Viper stuff, you haven't heard any of the Viper stuff. So I think the idea is that Mike Badger, when he left the band, by the way, I should say Mike Badger in '87 leaves the Lars when it becomes clear that they are now Lee Mavers' band and that they will be doing Lee Mavers songs and he will be the lead singer and replacing Mike Badger. He
Oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
My assumption had it been that it had always been a Lee Mavers kinda autocracy.
We're going to get into that. His vocals don't even appear on the first Lars compilation. It's very confusing until I can't. As I say, when I got into it, I was like, oh right, I didn't really have any idea about this either, or I had a little bit of an idea, obviously, but it just seemed like this big mess that I did not want to get into, and I think it's as I've gotten older, I've become really averse to like bonus tracks and alternate versions of things. Like
Yeah, same.
I feel like I used to just love seeking them out, and now I'm like I don't have time to listen to endless versions of just like of this album. I just want to listen to it as it is and not with loads of extra stuff on it. Having said that, I own 3 copies of the last albums. I own the one from 2005 with an extra 5 tracks on. I own the Japanese one, which has an extra 8 tracks on, and I own the one you mentioned, the deluxe edition, which has the extra disc. All right. So across this interview, Mavers is very consistent. The released recordings so far don't capture, as he says, the spirit of the Lars. He says they should sound simple, tough, street. Before we were signed, we had a little backline and a vocal PA. That's how we should sound, but they don't understand that. He denies being a perfectionist. He says, I'm not a perfectionist. I just want to capture the spirit of the music. He resents the production process, which he says, they've made us sound like stadium rockers. Most mind-blowing of all, he believes the album was overproduced and overfunded. This is his quote. He says, that album should have cost 500 quid to make. He says, we could have made a great record on 4-track bedroom gear. Now, as I said, the cost of this album is kind of part of the legend of it, because I believe it had 7 producers. Like they went through 7 producers. I could be missing somebody out. So this idea that they could have made the record with 4-track bedroom gear, there's 2 ways to take this. I've no doubt that in the late 80s, if he could have been told by somebody at Goat Discs some variation of, this is not how people make records. It's not going to sound like a real record if you just make it on a 4-track. And we think your songs are amazing and should be heard by as many people as possible. And, they shouldn't sound like they were recorded in someone's bedroom. However, if he really felt like this, he could have made an album like this at any point in the last 35 years, and he hasn't. He could at this point be like some revered lo-fi artist, or he could have gone to somewhere like Third Man Studios, do you know what I mean, and recorded everything in like this super authentic way, specific to the time that he wants to capture. But other people kind of embrace imperfection, whereas I think he's chasing something a bit more idealistic and kind of metaphysical.
Yeah, there's some of the rumors about like aborted sessions and like scrapped recordings. Like I think the most cartoonish one held up is like one day he decided the wrong dust was on the mixing
That's
desk.
it. Yeah, he wanted the '60s dust on the mixing desk.
Yeah, that's the one held up as the peak of lunacy of this album.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to go back to this lo-fi thing again later because I think it's important. So the album we have took 7 tries. Yeah, it was mixed in the end without the band and cobbled together from guide vocals. Mavers acknowledges some fault. He says some of it's been our fault. We are single-minded. But he also blames the industry. He says if producers and record company people were as single-minded as us, there wouldn't be a problem. They actually interview Andy McDonald, the head of Go Discs, for this piece, and he says after 3.5 years, it was time to bring these songs to life. Otherwise, the Lars would still be in their rehearsal room in Liverpool every day, which is, I think, true, judging on the last 35 years of activity. And then he says something which is totally blew my mind. Mavis says, "We could have done this album in 4 weeks. We'll deliver the tape and he'll say yes or no." This to me shows a quite a staggering lack of self-awareness. I don't think he really understands how difficult he is.
I think the most difficult artists do not understand how difficult they are as a rule.
Have you ever heard an alternate mix of a last song that's from that debut album that you prefer to the album version?
Yes, is the honest answer. I think the Mike Hedges version of Timeless Melody
Mm,
is incredible.
yeah.
And that's the one that sits in my playlist rotation. I don't think I bought it over when I left Spotify and moved to Apple, but I did used to have a playlist of the album in running order, but all of the Mike Hedges
Oh,
versions
interesting.
instead,
Yeah.
because I do think they're generally a better produced set of songs than what gets released.
I just think this idea that we never got the real thing and that the real thing doesn't even exist just slightly blew my mind. So I just stuck to the album as was. And I was like, I don't want to hear it if I don't want to think of it as something that's kind of not right. And knowing that they never got it the way they wanted it, I feel like it would just frustrate me if I heard like different mixes, even though I had listened to some of it. But that's interesting. But yeah, that's very interesting.
I I wish I'd known this was coming because I would have gone off and tried to source my various like recollections and anecdotes from articles I've read about the group. But one that really stood out to me and is the reason why I bought that deluxe edition and is the reason why I had that Mike Hedges Sessions playlist is because I remember reading the big long form piece. One of the observations from more than one person interviewed for it was that the Mike Hedges Sessions were the one. Like that was the closest they got. And then there was some bizarre personal kind of communications breakdown within the group itself
Okay.
rather than with Mike Hedges. And I think it was something crazy. Like, I think someone went on holiday and didn't tell,
That's exactly right.
Lee Mathers.
Yep.
And he's like, fuck it. These sessions suck. We're not doing this.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah. Yeah. I've read that. See, I didn't think that. It was my understanding that, yeah, that there were other versions, but the real shit was that, on a tape, on a 4-track somewhere tape that, do you know what I mean? That they had never been in like a proper studio and had a version that they were like 100% happy with. And that the demos that were shot before they started this recording process was, as far as Mathers was concerned, that was like the real shit. But maybe that the Mike Hedges sessions were as close as they got to that. So anyway, I went through everything, as I said, this week, which was pretty exhausting. So there's the early Viper material. So Viper, they have some live albums that they've released, one of which I did listen to all the way through, which is literally like just tinny. Like I feel like they've still got more hidden away that they're kind of waiting to like release. But
I remember this being a commentary on when Lars kind of archive material started coming out.
yeah.
Like people were like, "This appears to have been recorded on a dictaphone circa 1986."
Well, yeah. I mean, certainly there's a live album which I think is called Live and Dangerous or something like that, and yeah, that is very much recorded on dictaphone. Nevertheless, I listened to all of it. Anyway, the first Viper compilation is called Lost Lars 1984 to 1986, Break Loose. It's made up, as I say, mostly of songs by original frontman Mike Badger and Lee Mavers, and most lead vocals by Mike Badger. It's kind of more post-punk than anything else, but kind of skiffle, garage, and 60s pop influenced post-punk. It could almost be, I mean, in 2025, we're very much used to hearing this sort of thing. Do you know that band, The Cat's Meow, that was there, that reissue on...
Yeah, the Aussie sort of, it's like an Aussie tribute to C86.
Yeah, it's on, reissued on World of Echo. So you kind of almost imagine that you could be listening to something like that, but it's not that good. It's just very, as I say, I can't believe these are demos. Do you know what I mean? This is like a band working out what it is that they do. They're not thinking these are the songs that people are going, these are the versions of these songs that people are going to remember us by.
I mean, working out what they want to do tracks with a song title like My Girl Sits Like a Reindeer.
Well, My Girl Sits Like a Reindeer, funnily enough, is the only one that has a connection to later Lars records, because it is a very embryonic version of Feeling.
Oh, okay.
So interesting that you picked that one. Well, anyway, that's it on that whole compilation. Everything else is just like really tedious post-punk noodling. Doesn't sound like it's going anywhere. It could almost be a kind of post-hypnagogic pop take on Britpop with ultra lo-fi production. But again, it's not as good as that sounds. So the next release of early materials is Lost Lars 1986 to 1987, Cool in All. This is better. This is the Lars we know. It was Mavers.
I was going to say, looking at this is the one that like piques my curiosity the most.
Well, hold on. It's Mavers tracks with him singing. There's something here, but again, it still feels like unfinished demos. You can also skip this. I'll be completely honest. The next one is the one, and that is what I understand to be the real shit, which is called 1987.
Okay.
And as far as I'm aware, these are the demos that he's referring to when he's saying this is the sound we need to get back to.
Right.
Yeah. This is the band fully formed, cleaner, more consistent, more cohesive. There is a raw urgency here, and a couple of tracks literally sound like they could have been released in the 60s. Of all the Viper stuff, this is the one. This is worth listening to. Outside of the other two are quite a slog, to be honest, but this is very good. So it just backs the lo-fi thing. So kind of in 2025, lo-fi is a respected, fetishized aesthetic, which we all kind of accept and have heard in many different variations. We talked about hypnagogic pop, but you could also say rage rap or SoundCloud rap or any of that stuff. We've lived through Ariel Pink, Mac DeMarco, 4-track romanticism. So you might hear the kind of breakout Cool in All 1987 as a conscious choice. But again, I don't think that's right. I don't think these were ever intended to be heard by anyone other than the band or record companies.
This will sound like a tangent, but it does have relevance, I think. Kind of the idea of being lo-fi, like in this era. Have you heard the Nebraska box set?
Yes, I have, yeah.
So that struck me as really interesting because when I got to the electric Nebraska disc, like it really hammered home how much the original album is a 4-track demo tape.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden I was like, I can understand these lyrics. Like I could not understand these lyrics for like years.
Yeah.
And now it just all snaps into focus, hearing it in the kind of full band studio sessions.
Yeah. No, I know. I think, but outside of that album and, McCartney 2, there's not much you can point to. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like Nebraska caused a mainstream rush of copycats.
Yeah, that's fair.
I do understand the influence that it's had, and it's a significant thing to mention. But I don't think I don't think it's not something I think they've referenced. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's not the album that launched 1,000 Nebraska clones. Certainly not in the 80s. But yeah, interesting to point to that. Yeah, that would be kind of the thing to hold up and say, this is lo-fi before lo-fi.
Yeah, but I think McCartney 2 is a valid shout as well, and McCartney 1
Yeah,
for that matter.
absolutely. Yeah, and I guess you could say in 88 to 90 or 87 to 90 where they're making this record, lo-fi could be seen as a mistake, but again, that's not quite right either. I don't doubt that the 7 producers they went through, some of them would have been willing partners in pursuing a raw sound or a somewhat compromised version of that. But everything we know about Mavers so far suggests he was unable to compromise what was in his head. And he articulates this saying, before we were signed, that's how we should sound, but they don't understand that. So you haven't heard any of these? Because I was going to ask you if you felt like if you heard this stuff and you felt like it gets closer to what he was after, or whether you think this is just kind of him talking shit.
No, I mean, I haven't heard them, which means I have very little to contribute on the level of, yes, this unlocks it. These are the mysterious, like, kind of like mythical missing demos. I will say that I felt a bit like I'd found, like, the true album when I finally listened to those Mike Hedges versions. That felt kind of not in every single track's case, but in general, it felt like, yeah, I get this? This is clearly more towards what they were going for.
Yeah.
Because I think going back to that initial introduction to the band, after kind of, yeah, There She Goes sort of kind of like making its home in my head at a young age, the first time I heard the album in its original released form, I do remember thinking like, this is quite 80s
Oh,
sounding.
really? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like when I say 80s sounding, like I obviously don't mean like no jacket required, but it felt of a piece with the issues I've had previously with things like the first Stone Roses album,
Okay. Yeah.
where it's like I can hear a lot of isolation and like a lot of dryness in the production.
Okay. Yeah, I think maybe I just quite like that sound. I think that's what it comes down to. I think, yeah, I don't know. As far as the mythic version, I think you should check out 1987. You know the song "Cool and All," right?
Yeah.
So I think the definitive version of that. I mean, there's 2 versions of that on this compilation, but I think the definitive version of that is on that. You listen to that and you go, okay, I get it. I know what he's talking about. He wants that kind of like that real mono feeling that that they would have, that just by virtue of the way it was recorded, he would have got it from that. I mean, I think these were done in a proper studio, but yeah, they're very raw and
It's interesting looking at the track listing on Apple Music because there's parentheses session descriptions across the tracks. So the first 6 tracks are described as the Picket sessions.
yes,
And then 7 to 16 are described as the De Fritas
yeah,
session.
from the Echo and the Bunnymen guy, yeah.
Yeah, which is also a separate Viper release on Apple Music.
Yes, it's the same tracks. They're the same tracks, yeah.
Yeah, I figured as much. Then there's 2 tracks that are referenced as the Stables, and then there's a live set.
Yeah. The Jumpin' Jack Flash was a big part of their live set. I've now discovered in this period. So there's some other stuff I listen to. I mean, like, as I say, I listen to everything. I listened to the BBC In Session album. Have you heard that?
I remember it coming out at the time, but I've never heard it.
Okay, so I think again it's quite important to single this out because it's really good. Definitely have a listen to it. Yeah, the kind of non-Viper stuff, it's pretty essential, really, if you like the band. Surely it's closer to the source because they are quote unquote live recordings.
They are live in a 60s origin studio.
Yeah, exactly, and they're approved by the band, kind of by virtue of what they are. But to me, they sound a lot like the album. They're just kind of slightly stripped down versions of the album. It doesn't radically depart from the album. But see, listening to you describe it again, maybe my sonic predilections are just kind of playing tricks on me, and I'm just not noticing the stuff that you're noticing. Do you know the digital release Lost Tunes?
That does not ring a bell.
This is again a UMG release. It came out the same year as the deluxe edition, and it features yet more alternative mixes that were not on that deluxe edition.
Oh, that's interesting. So there is something I'd need to dig in at my like YouTube likes backlog massively for this, but whenever I had a really like kind of deep Lars obsession for a bit, there is yet more stuff that has not been officially released, and it's a lot of it was serviced as promo white labels. So there is, I mean, I keep on mentioning it a lot because I think it's their best song and it's just one of my favorite songs of all time. But there is yet another mix of Timeless Melody, which is truly incredible. And I've heard it previously as a YouTube upload only.
Yeah.
And apparently it's taken from like a super rare Go Discs promo 12-inch.
I'm aware of these promos because I went through them, and very frustratingly, there's a lot of not a lot. There's a handful of things on these promos which is not on the Cool and All 4-disc UMG box set. Both of us have done extensive work in licensing, so we understand how these things work. It's not always as easy as it seems. I think in this case, it is as easy as it seems, and either somebody didn't know what they were doing, or they didn't think it was worth including. But if you're putting out a 4-disc Lars box set in 2019 or whatever it was, and you're not including this stuff, you're not doing your job properly.
I am reminded of the circa 2008, 2009 New Order deluxe editions that had to be recalled because because it was pointed out that they were selling these deluxe editions at a high price, and that a lot of the 12-inch mixes that they'd included were not from the master tapes.
Yeah.
They were low quality vinyl rips
Yep.
that appeared to have come from file sharing sites.
Yeah, I remember that well. Good job, Rhino. Then, so there's an analogy I'd like to make, which I think you're going to have something to say about. I want to compare this. I want to compare the debut Lars album to another much delayed, expensive indie album of this era, and that is "Loveless" by My Bloody Valentine.
I was going to say, when you read that description of the last debut album as like insanely expensive and like, you know, endlessly delayed, it's like Kevin Shields is sat there taking notes.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, come on then.
Well, the thing is, the difference between the two is that the Lars had their album taken off them. Neither the title, artwork, or track list of the last debut album was chosen by the band. This was all completed
Oh, wow.
on their behalf by Go Discs. So it's like if
on their behalf.
yeah, well, on behalf of Go Discs. So yeah, it's a bit like if Kevin Shields had Loveless ripped from him. You're the resident My Bloody Valentine expert. Can you give a brief capsule summary of the making of Loveless? And also, do you think it's a fair comparison? Also, did Kevin Shields know what he wanted and how to get there, and it just took a long time? And Mavers perhaps did not know how to get to where he wanted to go.
Okay, so My Bloody Valentine start sessions to follow up the Isn't Anything album, which is on Creation. Loveless is also on Creation Records. First fruits of that work is the 1990 Glider EP, which has Soon on it, which is, it's kind of Baggy adjacent if you were being like super hot takey. You know, it's got programmed drums, there's drum loops in there. It's got much more textured guitar tones than
Much more.
than isn't than Isn't Anything had. Isn't Anything is still quite spiky
Yeah.
as an album.
Quite 80s as well.
Yeah, quite 80s, but also like you can feel the shared DNA with US alt rock
Yeah.
on Isn't Anything. By the time they hit Soon, they've left the atmosphere.
Yeah.
That track in the context of 1990 does not sound like anything else, despite the the slightly familiar drum loops.
Yeah.
Interestingly, on the Glider EP, the other 3 tracks, which is the title track, Don't Ask Why and Off Your Face, are much, much closer to Isn't Anything.
Yeah.
Like you can feel like the more conventional structures like poking through. The Glider EP comes out in April 1990. It is followed by the Loveless album in November 1991. So, in terms of the actual amount of time which has elapsed,
Yeah.
it's a little bit more than 18 months, but I think it's less about the time and more about the excruciating lengths that Kevin Shields goes to get the sound he
Yeah.
wants. And I mean, again, like the point to make is that broadly speaking, he achieves it. Like, but to achieve it, he bankrupts his
Yeah.
label to the point. Um, Basically, the recording process for Loveless almost bankrupts creation because Kevin Shields is tearing his way through engineers and studios with his incredibly uncompromising demands. And Creation Records is, led by Alan McGee, who has a very idealistic kind of artist first punk rock
Mhm.
mentality in terms of you back the artist. Like you do everything you can to facilitate their vision. What that means for Creation is that Dick Green, the co-founder of Creation Records, remortgages his fucking house to pay like My Bloody Valentine's studio bills. And as far as bets go, like if you heard There She Goes and you heard Timeless Melody, then and you were in you're back against the wall as a label financially, then I can understand why you would think, you know what, I will remortgage my house and it's like it's gonna be brutal, but there is a possibility that this could be like a huge record that will, you know, that will return that money to me. I love Loveless. I think Loveless is an incredible album. Like that is not a novel opinion, but like if I'm not sure I'd take that bet.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'd I'm not sure I would sit there with the half finished master tapes for Loveless and say, yeah, this is definitely gonna make me my money back. I will not lose my house over
This is gonna
this.
be whistled by the nation's milkmen.
So I keep my house, I'll probably get a new kitchen
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean indirectly, kind of this is like Loveless is the catalyst for Creation, like really going for a rough spell. The label's nearly bankrupted. Tim Green remortgages his house. McGee has to sell a significant stake to Sony Records to basically keep the business
Mm.
afloat. Which kind of it's a little bit murky, but it also ties into the idea that shortly afterwards he discovers Oasis, but Oasis are not signed to Creation. Oasis are signed to Sony and licensed to Creation.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, I think the Kevin Shields Lee Mavers comparison. Kevin Shields also has a very idiosyncratic like purity of vision, but I think he is indulged to a far greater extent by Creation, and the consequences of that are that he largely gets to where he wants to go.
Mm.
I don't feel like Lee Mavers does, but I think it's really hard to compare the two because Go Discs is not Creation. There is more business pragmatism there, but also like the elephant in the room is that the sheer scale of There She Goes success. I feel like that adds like a dimension to this story, which is really hard to overlook. I think we've talked a couple of times, like over the course of different episodes, about the lived reality of being an artist and how kind of like the impact of like income, a lack of it or an excess of it, like affects your relationship to the art you make. And it's really hard to look past that for Lee Mavers, someone with a real kind of like a really clear vision that he struggles to articulate to other people, but who is also in a position where, I mean, There She Goes is like a constant moneymaker.
Yeah.
There's never going to be a moment where there is not streaming income, recording income, like public performance income, composer income. You know, like for all the Lars album, undoubtedly cost an awful lot of money to make, and definitely more than £500. I'm also confident it's recouped purely off the performance of There She Goes.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
But I mean, not to labour the point, but I also would be fascinated to know what the situation is with what contract Lee Mavers signed or the band signed with Go, and how that's evolved since Go was merged into Universal.
Yeah.
Because for someone who's allegedly such a perfectionist and so prickly, I think it's astonishing just how much of the archives have been opened up over the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, it's staggering. Yeah, surely they could have probably blocked those Viper releases if they wanted to. I'm sure they would have. It's all Universal would have been able to do that, or Universal would have offered some, for a label like Viper, like a big ton of money to buy those demos back off them.
Yeah.
I think what I keep coming back to is that he hasn't done anything since then, and he could have easily made another album or re-recorded this one even. He would have had so many opportunities to do things exactly the way he wanted to do them. But in this day and age, like it just, people's minds have broadened so much, and he's such a kind of revered cult figure. I'm sure he's had lots of amazing offers, and they said, you just take your time and, use this equipment, this authentic analog equipment and just go for it. Here's, X amount of money, we back you, do whatever you want to do. And that hasn't happened. More to the point as well, in terms of this album, I don't know whether the real quote unquote Lars album is hidden in any of this stuff that I listen to. I know you're talking about the second disc on the deluxe edition, but again, it's not like the band really wanted to release those versions and then Go Disc kind of remix them and release something else. It's like they were just abandoned sessions. They're kind of really unique in terms of a band, because the key thing is that however good the material is, or the unreleased material, it was never meant for public consumption. In fact, you could argue that none of the music the band has made has been like sanctioned by them for public consumption. It's just kind of been released in a kind of, as they would say, kind of unfinished or good enough state, just to kind of fulfill contractual obligations.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said earlier, I'm fascinated by what the kind of how the contracts are dictating those releases.
Yeah.
Because it astonishes me that, admittedly, kind of Lee Mavers is like clearly like a challenge to work with. But all of that aside, he is also the person who wrote and performed and recorded There She Goes, which is a big asset as songs go.
Yeah. And I mean, I mentioned the 4 singles, right? It's like Way Out, so I'd give an 8 out of 10. Feeling, so I'd give 9 out of 10. Timeless Melody, I would give 10 out of 10. And There She Goes, I don't know, I'd give like 1,000,000 out of 10. I don't know. It's just like, it's a murderer's row of singles and an incredible album. Next week, we travel back to 1999, where Marilyn Manson find themselves at the end of history. The Melody Makers celebrate the coolest people in music. Fridge are post-rock. And Gay Dad, well, we'll get into it.
In the meantime, you can find us on the socials and most of the usual places. That's Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all under the Analog Slop name. That's all one word and spelt ANALOGUESLOP. However, if you prefer your podcasts to involve static pictures, we are also on YouTube. That channel is youtube.com/ANALOGUE slop. And finally, if you want to send us an email, we're reachable predictably on analogslop@gmail.com.